Welcome to Mission Innovation, Becoming a Frontier Agency, presented by Microsoft. I'm your host, Francis Rose. More than a dozen federal agencies have artificial intelligence strategies now that detail how they'll use AI to gain efficiencies, streamline operations, and deliver services to citizens faster and better. Those strategies are a requirement of two memos from the Office of Management and Budget. On this program, leaders from CMS, CISA, and the Government Accountability Office will show you how AI can drive productivity, strengthen security, speed up decision advantage, and build trust in government operations. To begin, I welcome Carmen Kruger, Corporate Vice President of U.S. Federal at Microsoft. Carmen, welcome. Thanks for joining me. What's that term mean, frontier agency, and why is it important for where agencies want to go in the new year?
Absolutely. So a key central point in becoming a frontier agency is really driving both productivity and innovation simultaneously. So you'll look at those agencies that are doing it right, and they are really taking full advantage of innovation, but they're doing it with an absolute focus on productivity. The second thing we really see frontier agencies and frontier firms, companies, is really not just plan for innovation in the state of today, but they're really looking to move that and be agile enough to plan for the future. And as we know, that speed and agility required, it really is exponentially even faster than we've had 5 years ago. And so that's a truly important attribute of a firm that is frontier.
Either a prime benefit or maybe a side benefit is it sounds like it gets organizations out of the business of thinking about innovation for innovation's sake and gets them to thinking about innovation for productivity's sake.
100%. And moreover, that really allows them to sort of ingest it as part of the daily task. We're innovating today. It's not a special project. In the future, that's kind of how it's going to have to be. Innovation's going to cycle much quicker. And I think what's interesting too is in the commercial world, frontier firms are really creating a competitive advantage for themselves, right? They want profitability. Mm-hmm. You know, they want market share. They want wallet share. They want mind share. And we're not in an episode here of Squawk Box, so we won't get into all the numbers, right? But the reality is that same competitive advantage is required for federal agencies. So it's a creative. Mm-hmm. So if the federal agencies become strategically and competitively advantaged, so does the rest of the companies, right? The citizens and the customers of them and the personnel, the warfighters and the federal personnel. So it's really a national imperative to take on this task of moving to frontier.
What's the right measure for an agency to look at themselves as a frontier organization, given that some of those markers that you just talked about, profitability and so on, that's not what a federal organization is moving toward. Some of those other things they are, but that's the main one. How does one then determine as an agency, we're a frontier agency, we're moving in that direction?
Sure. So let's talk about like statistics first or data points. And I think oftentimes you need to look at the fact pattern to make sure you're properly aligning that. So when we look at fact patterns of people using it for pure productivity tool, we're going to look at how many hours does the employee, the federal personnel, the warfighter save in that process? What are accuracy rate increases that are happening, right? What are the potential benefits to the citizen if you're properly applying this in efficiencies, in accuracy rates of, let's say, delivery of benefits? And we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to the sort of the end and some of the stats that we have seen very early days in many instances of actual tangible outcomes. But you're spot on. Mm-hmm. You got to measure it.
We'll do that in a moment. But what are organizations in government already doing that kind of lay the groundwork for them to become a frontier agency?
Sure. So I'm going to step back for a moment and really talk about some of the attributes. What do we need to do to become frontier, right? It's an important thing. And I would start with something that seems a little bit counterintuitive to many. Innovation, and let's put AI in the center of that, is really about enriching the employee experience. Because AI is really there to help foster and allow for the information worker, the employee, to become more, I think the term I'll use is human decision-making power. So it empowers that human decision-making. So we don't look at it as a substitute for human. We look at it as an augmentation of their ability to make better decisions. So a frontier agency is going to empower those individuals to actually become part of the innovation cycle. Very critical. The second thing that we see often is that innovation has to be connected to the mission. And you spoke about this earlier when you said, well, what are the metrics? If it's not connected to the mission, does it matter? So we have sort of the enemy of innovation, we call random acts of innovation. The scatter shot, right?
Yeah.
Idea du jour that gets put in front of the organization, they lose trust. And it creates false positives.
Shiny objects.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
It's the shiny object problem. We've seen it again and again and again. And I think we spoke, what is it, 10 years ago?
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a while, right? Okay, back then we were talking about business processes. It remains today that we need to reshape business processes with the capabilities we have in innovation and AI. If we don't reshape the business processes, we're not really thinking about the fact that back when that business process was created, what we have available today is different. So if you don't take that into consideration, then you're really missing a huge ability to do the last piece, which is the idea is to bend the innovation curve.
All right, we just have a couple of minutes left, and you mentioned a couple of moments ago about the stats that you've seen, the markers, the actual data points that you have. We talked about it a little bit before we went on the air. What does that look like? What should these organizations be looking for specifically regarding data, whether you've seen it in the private sector or seen it in the public sector, Carmen?
So I'll bifurcate that question a little bit. So when we talk about data itself, what's really important about data are two things. And you'll have another opportunity to talk about the security side of that. This is about the democratization of data. That does not mean that in democratization of data, everybody gets access to every piece of data. Within the bounds of access controls and within the bounds of data controls, that ontology that is developed is super important. So you have democratization of data, you have the ontology that gives it the context that they need to ingest it. So a lot of times what happens is people have access to data, they don't really understand where it came from, or they don't have access to data, but they should. And so when it comes to data, we're going to look at not data as a data point, but how are they using that data to increase productivity levels, right? To increase things like processing times of simple tasks that need to be done, or the complex kinds of scientific breakthroughs we can make that were accelerated through the use of technology, innovation, and AI.
All right, show me the numbers. Show me some stats here that you brought along that we talked about before it went on the air.
Yes. So we had just a simple, a large agency go ahead and take a crack at a co-pilot pilot. And in the short period of time they did this pilot, they had a 74% improved quality of work. So they're looking at a quality metric, accuracy, 75% productivity boost, and they were saving the upwards of 2 hours a week for many employees in just time savings, which if you multiply that across the hundreds and thousands of employees, that's pretty dramatic. Let's talk about another one. Processing of legal and contractual and financial documents, right? Arduous. The estimate that was given to this agency to do this particular effort was years, and it was processed in weeks. So it's an example, again, of how you're measuring what a business process could take and how you shorten that. And the people who had to do that, that's not their only job.
No, that's right.
Right?
That's right.
So you're looking at what productivity do you gain now, which is the next set of measures, by allowing them to go do other more important high value items. I'll give you a couple more.
Give me one more. We're almost out of time.
This is so hard. I love this one. So an agency needed to upgrade, modernize the code of a legacy application. And what they used was something called GitHub Copilot, which allows you to automate the way that you recode an application. And the developers cited a 25 to 50% reduction in coding time. That's a really important, that's what's happening at scale in the commercial market. Most of the technology companies now are doing a lot of their coding using this automation, and it's something we absolutely should be able to bring to our federal agencies.
It's great to have numbers on this stuff and not just think about innovation as a concept. Carmen, thanks very much for joining me today.
Thank you.
When we come back, moving from strategy to implementation, mission innovation, becoming a frontier agency continues in a moment. Welcome back to Mission Innovation, Becoming a Frontier Agency. I'm Francis Rose. The federal government's 2025 Artificial Intelligence Use Case Inventory shows a huge jump from the 2024 inventory. That 2024 list detailed more than 1,700 use cases. Janine Iwugo is Deputy Director for the Center for Program Integrity at the Centers for Medicare Medicaid. Nellie Babayan is AI Director of U.S. Federal at Microsoft. Ladies, welcome. It's great to have you on the program. I want to start with you, Janine. What do you do at CMS to ascertain data integrity and governance to make sure that the data that goes into the AI applications that you use gives you data and information that you can depend on to make decisions?
So I'll start by saying that at CMS, our Chief Information Officer and our Chief Data Officer have gone through tremendous strides to make sure that we have high quality data. Data analysis is garbage in, garbage out. If we don't have good data, what we're able to do with it is not going to be as reliable or as strong as we need it to be. So we work very hard to make sure that we have high quality data and that we make that data available to our data analytics teams and to our contractors. We recently had a event called the Chili Cook-Off. And we were lucky enough to be able to provide a limited data set to the contestants in that competition so that they could test their analytic capabilities using real data, which gave us much better results that we'll actually be able to use within the agency.
You anticipated my question, which is what did you learn from that and how will that improve the way that you go about operations?
Well, what we learned is that the more data we give them, the more data we make available, the better results that we get back. In the program integrity space, having quality data is very important. Making sure that you're able to look at a wide array of data sets is really important to doing the important work that we do. So,
Nellie, welcome. It's great to see you again. Thanks for being on the program today. A lot of agencies for a long time focused so much on the integrity of their data, cleaning it up, standardizing, and so on. They kind of had a state of paralysis as far as actually using it. What's the right balance that you've seen organizations across government strike to be able to actually move out with using data to help make decisions?
Thank you, Francis, and great to be back. Absolutely, you're right. There's so much importance when we're talking about data governance, right? Data governance, data provenance, and earlier we heard that data ontology are very important when we are on that journey for implementing AI successfully and securely. And I'm very glad to hear what Janine mentioned about CMS doing all that amazing work and cleaning and providing quality data. But also what's important is not to be stuck in that pilot of proof of concept paralysis, but actually understand and what use cases are important, what scenarios are high value importance to the mission, to your organization, to try those, test and evaluate, understand what are those success criteria that we are striving towards when we're talking about the proof of concept, and then move from those generalized to a larger set of use cases, iterate on them, and expand to production and expand to the entire organization. So I came to Microsoft and to industry from academic background, and the understanding really is that you understand the big picture, but you also narrow down to smaller set of use cases. You iterate fast, you fail fast if necessary, learn from that, and then go into expansion of more meaningful and secure implementation of AI with quality data.
The key point, or one key point that you made there, is the emphasis on use cases. And I think of all of the kind of the technology phenomena that I've seen over the years that I've been talking to people in the federal government, artificial intelligence seems to be the one that the agencies have done the best with at tying to use cases instead of saying, let's just try this because it's the newest thing, a cool thing, whatever. What's the key to identifying use cases that are appropriate for AI and then making sure that the data is ready to do the things that you and Janine have talked about?
I talk to many customers across the federal spectrum, right? And some of them have a handful of use cases in mind, and the other ones maybe have 200 and 300 use cases. Even this is a real thing I heard. I think it's very important to prioritize those use cases because nobody has the staff or the finances to do 300 proof of concepts. So how do we prioritize those use cases? Think about the importance to the mission. How important this use case is for your mission, right? And how much time that is going to take to implement that use case? What's the feasibility of implementing that use case? What are the success criteria? And then it's very important to also consider the risk. And it's not only the risk in terms of security and safety, but also the risk of not implementing AI and falling behind. Mm-hmm. So those are all the different criteria that we can think about when we are prioritizing use cases and understanding what the ROI is. And the ROI is not necessarily financial only, but it can be understood as, for example, time saved when making decisions. How well you are serving your customers, in this case, the citizens, right, the American citizens. So that all of that in combination is helping us to understand what are those use cases that we need to prioritize. And it's very important to not do that knee-jerk reaction and start implementing AI, but actually very meaningfully think about how is this going to help my organization and my mission to advance and perform even better than we used to.
We will talk more about security later in the program, Nellie, for sure. But Janine, you were nodding very enthusiastically when Nellie was talking about using this data and the applications, measuring ROI on saving time for customers. Why did that resonate with you so much?
Well, so recently, the Center for Program for Integrity and our program integrity efforts across CMS, we did an analysis of our efforts in 2024 and determined that we had a 14-to-1 ROI. So not only am I very proud of that, it shows that we use the right risk register to make sure that we were dedicating our resources in the places that gave us the biggest payoff.
What did you do to get to that, and so that you wound up with that result? Because that strikes me that there are other people who would like to achieve the same result.
Well, we do a pretty sophisticated data analysis of the 4 to 5 million claims that we get every day to determine how much is at risk with each provider that we're looking at. The suspicious behavior, there's a lot of Medicare fraud, there's a lot of healthcare fraud in the industry. And so we need to focus our resources in the places that are going to give us the biggest bang. So we're looking at outlier behavior, we're looking at the number of dollars and claims that have been submitted to us for payment. And we're looking for things that look abnormal. And so sometimes those abnormalities can be explained and they're legitimate, and sometimes they're not. The number of outlier or suspicious things that pile on top of each other lets you know that this is a high risk either provider or a high risk situation, and we should look at that more closely.
And from a risk management perspective, Nellie, it strikes me that's the real force multiplier here. It's almost, I think about it in my brain as laying layers of graph paper on top of each other, and you see that, oh, in this particular spot there are dots all the way down, so that's something we could look at. Is that, maybe not in that simplistic of a manner, but is that the way that these applications are working in the way that Janine is talking about?
Yes, in a way. And that is why when we're talking to our customers within the federal space and also our commercial customers, when we're talking about AI is not just about the models, right? We need to abstract us from this or that model, because the model that is popular today is going to be obsolete next week. That's how fast they come to market. What we need to think about is a comprehensive platform and the secure platform where you can choose from a multitude of models that are suitable for your specific use case, and a platform that allows you not just to choose those models, but to securely bring in your data, then iterate on your use case, evaluate your use case, and then continuously monitor the deployment of that use case so that you can continue to improve. And then it can help you manage the life cycle of that use case and that application and generalize to other scenarios so you don't reinvent the wheel every time. So that the idea of having that security baked in and the controls and risk management baked into that larger comprehensive platform is how we at Microsoft are also approaching AI implementation.
Janine, as you describe what you're up against, it sounds like you just have an avalanche of stuff that's coming in every single day, every single hour. How do you sort through it to make sure that this is information that is meaningful for us to be able to use to help mitigate fraud or whatever the mission aspect is that you're going for? And this is background noise that we don't really need to pay any attention to.
So like Nellie said, we're using models, and at CMS, our models are based off of known entities, known factors, situations from the past where we've had successful investigations, or kind of like when you look at Netflix and they say, you like this show the last time you watched it, you watched the entire series.
Yeah.
We're going to propose another one that's just like that. We use models in that way, but we also use models to look at new, evolving schemes that maybe cutting edge. Something new is happening in the fraud arena that we haven't seen before, and we use a model to say, this is something that we should look at because we're seeing this in different pockets. Within the Center for Program Integrity, in the last year, we launched something called the Fraud War Room, which brought together law enforcement, investigators, and data analysts into one room. They met for 2 hours, 2 days a week. That was not popular. But it kind of collapsed what was previously a very linear process into a short snippet of time where those people were able to look at a high-risk case, make a decision, and move it on, and suspend payment. And so in 2025, the Fraud War Room was successful in suspending $1.8 billion.
Wow.
That meant that we had our analytics right. That meant that we had the risk register right. And it meant that we had the right people in the room. So building on that model, of course, the war room is a sustained thing now that we will continue. But looking for opportunities like that where you can take something that's more linear, that takes more time, that uses more people, applying AI onto it to figure out how you can supercharge it, make it run faster, better, smarter, faster, using the same resources will give you a better output. And then you can use those resources and retool them for something else.
Was the process of getting the right people into that war room as simple as, here's the end-to-end, we have the information here, and this is the person who needs it to be able to go out and mitigate this case, prosecute the case, catch the bad guys, or whatever the end result is that you're going for? Or was there more to it than that? Was it more than just listing out, here are all the folks that might have to touch this at some point?
Well, we started with a very small team of people because we were nervous about the dedication of time. But then once the war room started to get traction, our numbers started to go up. People said, well, look, this is really valuable. This is not a waste of my time.
Right.
And I know this other person who could really benefit from being here. And if they were in the room, we could add their knowledge, skills, and then their role to this schematic, and then we can capitalize on that. So when it was all over, I have people now asking to be a part of it, not telling me that it's a waste of their time. And so now we have a rotation where we don't, have the same people dedicated all the time. But if people want to stay, it's fine.
When you have people asking you to come to the 2-hour meeting, I imagine you're doing something
That is a beautiful thing.
really,
it's
really
a beautiful
right.
thing. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
This avalanche of information that organizations like CMS have, Nellie, when somebody's looking at it and starts to feel like we just are on data overload, what's the solution, or what's at least the first step or two to take to try to get out of that and try to wrap your arms around what you have?
I know a lot of the agencies, a lot of organizations, they're facing that avalanche of information, overload of information. You spend hours and hours sifting through different types of data, whether it's structured data or unstructured data. And this is when at least the simple use cases of summarization, natural language queries, and an AI-enhanced search come very handy, because those can help you with making sense of that data, consolidating that data from different sources, different data types, and then creating relevant points between those data types. So you can, when you are searching for information through that raw data, then you can find the right one. I can actually bring an example from one of our customers that we've been working with. They have jumped on this data governance train early on, understanding that they need to get their data in order. They need to clean the data, as also Janine mentioned before, understand the provenance of the data, understand who has access to that data, prepare that data for the era of AI. And that one of those customers is, for example, the Hanford site, which is one of the DOE sites that is tasked with nuclear cleanup. Right? And they have a very important mission, very important task, and they have partnered with our team to modernize their data platform, to bring everything into that more modern, consolidated version. So now that data is also ready for AI, and then they can not face that overload of information, but actually meaningfully use AI to find the right data when needed.
I want to go back to that war room concept, Janine, because I imagine there are people watching this who are going, I want to do that. What did you learn in that process that you didn't know when you started that you would tell somebody else, make sure you do this or make sure you try this at the beginning instead of when we figured it out later on in the process?
So I will say, honestly, this is not the first time that this has been tried. So within our center, we've tried other configurations of bringing people together, all being in one space, talking about a suite of cases, but the output of that was then plugged into like the normal way of doing business. So we collapsed one part of the process and then put it back into the machine, which slowed everything down. In government, sometimes things move slower than we would like for them to. But with the war room, we unleashed really our data team to help us make decisions faster. And we took on more risk ourselves. So previously, after we would do one of these intensive reviews, we would do a whole investigation and do, interviews and do all this stuff. We trusted the data because we had powerful analytics. We leveraged AI. We knew when you have like 7 factors piled on top of each other, this is kind of a no-brainer. Like we need to really call somebody. And if we do need to call somebody, if we find out that we made a mistake, there's a process for appealing that mistake. So taking on a little bit more risk ourselves had tremendous rewards for us. So we actually started this as a pilot. Was a 6-week pilot. It was moderately successful after 6 weeks. We brought the team in, everybody who participated in that 6 week, we took their feedback. We said, what could we do better? Who's not here? Who should be here? What tweaks should we make? How else can we unleash you? What else should we test and try? And then we just ran with it. And so after that pilot, we were wildly successful, even more successful than we were on the front end because we listened to our team and we evolved. And then we cut out some more red tape. After that step in the process. So,
Janine, congratulations on your success. Thanks for being here today, Nellie. It's great to see you again. Thanks for joining me. When we come back, the balance between security and productivity as agencies pour data into AI applications. You're watching Mission Innovation, becoming a frontier agency. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Mission Innovation, becoming a frontier agency, presented by Microsoft. Cyber and AI professionals across government say they're taking a 2-pronged approach to AI in the security realm. One is how AI can help secure systems. The other is how to secure the AI applications themselves. Robert Costello is Chief Information Officer at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Steve Fahle is U.S. Government Security Leader at Microsoft. Gentlemen, welcome. Thanks for joining me. Bob, I start with you. How are you approaching each of those prongs in the AI and security realm?
Thanks, Francis. So actually, it's, I'm always excited to describe what we're doing at CISA, and I do get to work with what I think is, the best workforce in the world. So it's very interesting being the CIO there, having to deploy technologies for people that's job is to advise on how to secure technologies. And we have, such great technical expertise. So I think first and foremost, there's almost a third element to me, which is kind of workforce. Like, how do we train people? How do we educate them on using the new tooling? And then how do we expand out and set a great example from CISA on how to deploy new technologies securely and effectively. So I think on one part, it's really enabling my defensive cyber operations group to not just advise, but to be consumers of artificial intelligence solutions. We've implemented some new tooling in our ATO process that is actually using AI to help us write control statements to get things out faster so that in the hands of the operators. We're using some AI in our penetration testing work as well. So that I can, constantly test our systems. I think on the other front, one of the things that you have to do, and I heard, some of the other interviewees talk about it too, is, we have to get our data ready. We have a lot of data, it says, on our infrastructure security side, emergency comm side, and then, of course, on our cyber side. Some of those are in systems that are 20 plus years old. So we're spending a lot of work on getting that data AI ready, modernizing our systems so that AI can be used effectively, because you can modernize anything and sometimes make it worse through that process. I can make any process go faster through IT. It doesn't always mean that I'm getting the right answers out of it. But I think, I'll circle back to just the first part too. There's a lot of training for our workforce and a lot of working together to actually understand what problem do you want to solve. Because in some cases, AI may not be the best solution to that problem. And we really want to work with our customers very rapidly to understand what their requirements are so that we can solve them quickly, whether through AI or sometimes more traditional IT means.
Steve, welcome. It's great to see you again. What are you seeing agencies doing that are taking on kind of the same issues that Bob's taking on at CISA regarding securing the AI, but also using the AI to secure the system more broadly?
Thanks, Francis. Good to see you as well. As we've worked with agencies really across the federal government, we focus on those two prongs that you mentioned. And I'll also add a third as we talk through in the conversation. There's the security with AI, which is really around the leaps and bounds of progress that we're making on cybersecurity, leveraging AI. There's the security of AI, which is those systems themselves, and how do we ensure that they're functioning as intended, as desired. And then there's security from AI. What happens when an adversary leverages AI? And so the first thing that we really get straight with agencies is, which problem are we trying to solve? Mm-hmm. And so it starts in that pragmatic grounding of which problem are we trying to solve, and how can we really address that in a way that's most risk appropriate for the agency and really take advantage of the opportunity to transform their operations. And cybersecurity is a field that is in desperate need of transformation. As we work, day in, day out, defenders need every advantage they can get. And thankfully, there's a lot of advantage that comes with AI. We use it in different modalities. And so sometimes it's just an assistant to the cybersecurity professional, providing expertise in areas where maybe they don't have it. And sometimes it's a fully specialized system that can go and perform tasks on behalf of the security teams to help them scale.
So you used a couple of terms there that I think are important to light on for a couple of minutes. Security from AI implies to me the adversary's AI. Do I understand you correctly
Yes.
on that? Okay, so with that being the context, that's one I'm sure that you deal with all the time too. We'll come back to what CIS is doing and how you're working through that, because I'm real curious about that. But and then you also use the term defenders, defending from those attacks that AI is generating. How's that different? How are those attacks different than the types of attacks that for so long had to be done manually, had to be done by a human sitting in front of a computer in some country that doesn't like us?
Well, what's remarkable is that when you look at an ideal adversary campaign, the goal is to perform as well as the humans do. And so the great news for cybersecurity professionals is the lessons that we've learned over the last 20 years are absolutely applicable here and still pertain to the new world in which adversaries are primarily using AI to become more productive. And so that's where there really is an impetus. It's been a challenge for cyber defenders to keep up with the pace of accelerating threats. And so while the adversaries are taking advantage of AI, what we can see is that really defenders have a greater opportunity. We believe that AI can not just level the playing field, but actually give defender advantage. A very simple example of that would be thinking about vulnerabilities. Traditionally, it's been a very asymmetric challenge where adversaries need to find one vulnerability, and the defenders need to find every vulnerability because you don't know which one the attacker is going to pick. And so that's been a very asymmetric equation that puts the defender at a significant disadvantage. But as we create better detection of vulnerabilities with AI, now the attacker and the defender really have the same capability, and the defender is able to proactively do work and get out in front. So we believe there's a tremendous possibility of transformation when it comes to cybersecurity.
So when Steve explains it like that, Bob, it makes it a lot more clear to me, not that it wasn't before, but it's more clear to me now why you added that workforce prong and want to make sure that you're training your folks that they can fully leverage those kinds of tools.
Absolutely. And as Steve brought up too, I think one of the things I'm excited about too, for a long time it was patch every vulnerability, patch it as quickly as possible. And that's really hard on the operations teams. It's really hard on the defender teams. Where I'm excited for some of our work, and we're seeing it across the spectrum, is things are compromised or vulnerabilities are exploited by the adversary a lot faster than they used to be. It could be minutes from disclosure or seconds. But what's really important is, am I even vulnerable to this vulnerability? Or am I not vulnerable to that vulnerability? But there's three things that would actually be classified as low criticality, but when they're chained together, the adversary can then do something on the system. So what I'm excited about is we're starting to get to the point where we can prioritize our teams better using tools that have AI enabled in them, get better visibility into our environments, into our networks through modeling that we're doing quite extensively now. And that's where I'm excited, because it is an exhausting job working in a security operations center, working on an O&M team, constantly patching. And we're not saying don't patch, believe me, we want you to patch quickly. But it's important to be able to prioritize and then apply prioritizations to the work that your teams are doing. And I think the other thing that we're seeing too, the adversary is using AI to become more relatable in some cases. I've seen some phishing emails, and in fact, my family got hit with one, and I'm like, wow, that was really good. It really looked like it came from your bank. It knew quite a bit about you. Mm-hmm. There were no English errors at all in the email. And I can just imagine, like, I'm trained to look at this. I kind of do it every day, but to the average person, they're not. So we're definitely seeing the adversary take advantage of AI in that fashion. But I think Steve's absolutely right. I think the defenders can use AI for a substantial advantage.
So getting ahead of the curve, Steve, is something that we've been talking about in this space in the federal government for 15 or 20 years. What's it going to take for the defenders to at least reach par with the attackers? What's driven this, and what gives you hope that we're kind of at that stage?
Well, I believe we're at a time when the risks are truly realized, and it's been a journey to get there. And I think now cyber defenders realize that the task that is in front of them and the enormity of that task is, do we have an inventory of our assets? I was thinking as Bob was talking, do we have an inventory of our assets? Yes. Is that inventory correct? Well, how do I know if it's correct or not? If the attacker discovers something in inventory that I don't know about, does it matter if I've patched everything in inventory, right? So cyber is a complex, layered problem that's very difficult to enumerate and very difficult to say, I have gotten to 100%. 100% is somewhat mythical in cybersecurity. But when it comes to understanding your environment, understanding the data that you have, there's a tremendous amount of security data that's within the US government, thanks to a lot of the great work that's been done in Zero Trust, both from the Department of War as well as from CISA. NIST has given great guidance. As we look at agencies moving down that path, they have more and more security data every day. It's leveraging that data to have more insights into your environment, to understand it better than the adversary does. That's really important. And I think finally, there's enough data to have sort of passed that hurdle of, I think I'm good. We have this term watermelon green. And the idea is it's green on the outside and it's red on the inside. And many of the metrics that we've had in cybersecurity, it's very easy to say, oh, we're green on that metric. But the reality is that there's a challenge there. There's an opportunity for an attacker there that's masked because there isn't enough data. Thanks to the Zero Trust work that's been done, now there's enough data to say we can now enumerate a lot of what this problem space is. And with AI, hopefully we can understand it and take the necessary actions.
Does that mean, and I'll ask you this, but I want to get your input on it too. Does that mean that you're thinking about your risk framework differently that you're prioritizing risk differently than you did before?
It is, and I think one of the things that I'm excited about really being enabled to work in a different fashion. Most recently, I think we are now able, like we used to authorize systems for 3 years and then would kind of look at them every 3 years. How are they doing? Now, to Steve's point, we're collecting so much telemetry, the ability to synthesize that with new tooling and actually get, an up to the second risk posture of a system is really fascinating to me and also exciting because it's kind of been that nirvana that we've always wanted. At DHS, I get to serve a couple of roles, but we're also the authorizing official as the CIO. So I have to accept the risk of all our IT environments. Sometimes that was more of a gut reaction on how I think the system is. Now I'm actually able to kind of dive down deep into it. I think the zero trust work has been critical to that. But to be able to actually see what is normal for a system, what is not normal, what are people doing in the system, what is the system to system traffic and interactions looking like, have been really exciting. So it does allow us to make, I think, better risk decisions. I think the other thing, through all of this, you can't be afraid to try. We have to constantly innovate, fail fast, pick ourselves up when the project wasn't that great, and not, I always use the term that one of my mentors used when I worked for him, stop admiring the problem. Try something, try and solve it. It's okay if it doesn't work. Try something else. And I think we're seeing more and more of that on the federal side to move a lot faster.
Yeah, and that's where I was going to go next, Steve. It strikes me that Bob and his colleagues and peers across government can make these decisions and see these problems much, much faster than they were ever able to before.
Absolutely. And I think as we look at what it takes to field new capability, traditionally it's been a very expensive exercise to say, I'm going to field new cyber capability. Could be months, could be years until that capability has efficacy. But with AI tooling, effectively the protocol for communication now is human language. And so we've lowered that bar. Earlier in some of the interviews talking about the democratization of data, we've also really democratized capability for IT systems. And so when we look at new AI capabilities, rule of thumb when my team's working on a new AI capability, a new tool, if you can't get to 80% in 20 minutes, maybe you want to move on. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit. There are a lot of low-risk things that can be done that have high value, high efficacy, reducing the cost for defenders, increasing the cost for attackers, really winning that economic warfare of cybersecurity. And so, that litmus test, if this doesn't work, move on. Fail fast, move to the next thing. It's absolutely worth it.
You're nodding very enthusiastically.
Big believer in that.
Yeah. How are you using these tools to be able to drive that culturally, to get your people, you talked about the workforce earlier, to get people to think differently, that now we can do things in a different way?
I think it's hard, and I think, one of the first things is like everyone wants to know that their leader has their back. So I gotta not just say that, I gotta support my team through it. It's okay if the project failed or that initiative didn't quite work out. Since I joined the Air Force as something called a tech controller and worked on very old systems at the time, things advanced very quickly. When I was kind of a hands-on keyboard doing some of this work, I had to learn like 3 different query languages, depending on what vendor's tool you were using. Now we're making it so you can ask a question in plain language and get a response. But you still have to understand what questions to ask, how to phrase them. You have to understand the technology and the data still. So it's allowing us to maybe take our teams in a different direction in a training way than we had in years past. We have to be very willing to try new things.
Bob, Steve, great to have both of you on the program. Thanks very much for joining me today. You've heard a lot on this program about using technology to innovate and become a frontier agency. You'll learn more about the infrastructure that your agency needs, as Bob mentioned a moment ago, to make innovation a reality when Mission Innovation, Becoming a Frontier Agency, continues in a moment. Welcome back to Mission Innovation, Becoming a Frontier Agency. Chief Information Officers across government tell me one of the most important components of the advancement of AI at agencies is cloud computing. Those CIOs say one benefit for agencies is the ability to take AI applications anywhere their users can reach the cloud. Dave Hinchman's Director for IT and Cybersecurity at the Government Accountability Office. Wole Moses is Chief AI Officer of U.S. Federal Civilian at Microsoft. Gentlemen, welcome. It's great to have both of you here. Dave, I want to start with you. What are you seeing agencies doing infrastructure-wise that set them up for success, or in some cases maybe hasn't, for introducing these AI applications?
Well, I think what's fascinating from GAO space is that the federal government is in its baby steps with the AI journey. Yes, there are a lot of tools out there. There are a lot of applications. It's not wholesale AI yet, but that's what agencies are looking at and trying to figure out how they're going to integrate this transformational technology across their organization. And I think that one thing that we've learned in our decades of auditing major system implementation is that we would encourage every agency considering this journey to make sure that you're doing the planning, maybe even before you engage with the vendor for the very first time, to make sure that you're pursuing something and you know what you're going to get, as well as building in the flexibility and the adaptability to grow that network down the road, because we all know that AI is going to change and evolve. Probably as we're having this conversation, something new is going to happen. So you want to be sure that what you spend a lot of money on is going to suit your needs further downstream as well.
Wole, welcome. It's great to have you on the program. What are you seeing organizations that are successful at using artificial intelligence applications doing 6 months, 12 months, 18 months ahead of time, infrastructure-wise, to get themselves set up for success?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for having me. So with AI capabilities today and thinking about the architecture, so Microsoft as well as other cloud providers are providing AI models, AI GPUs for training and inferencing, tooling and infrastructure for building AI applications, all is managed services. And so to a large extent, that simplifies the architectural decisions that agencies need to make ahead of time. Now, at the same time, though, there are some core decisions they need to make around model selection and model benchmarking, AI observability and governance for the applications they plan to build. And so those are things they need to think about. But then there's another big thing that is important, which is around how they want to integrate with their existing systems. And so at the end of the day, a lot of what we're seeing in terms of AI applications involves integration with a case management system or a records management system, some existing system in place. And so how is that integration going to happen? Are we going to use APIs? Are we going to use something like model context protocols? So those are some of the early decisions around architecture that agencies need to make.
A couple of thoughts on what you said there, Wole. First of all, integrating AI systems into some of these systems these agencies have, as Dave can testify and has testified actually, are really old and were never, nothing like what agencies want to do now was even conceived of. What's that integration look like? And how does one plan now for, as Dave also said, AI is changing so quickly that what one thinks one might need to do today might be completely different 6 months, a year from now?
Yeah, another great question. So what's happening is that we're building abstraction layers to enable the connectivity into those systems. And so an example of an extraction layer may be something like a REST API into that system. Model context protocol is an AI native way to connect into your existing systems. And then also, you also have other technologies in place that can connect even into systems that don't support APIs. And so those are existing abstraction layers that can be taken advantage of to plug into those applications, which are important to your point, because a lot of what we see in government today is legacy that needs to be modernized. And so there's a path to doing that as well.
Dave, I said something earlier in the program that I want to use your experience and expertise to check myself on. I said in the years that I've been following this stuff in government, AI is probably the technology that has been the most comprehensively adapted using use cases instead of just using the technology for the technology's sake. Is that a fair read on my part? Is that what your research has borne out as well?
I think it is. AI is going to transform how government operates. It's going to change how citizen services are delivered. It's going to change how things are managed on the back end. And so, yes, I think you just need to look at the GitHub repository of AI use cases to see the growth in that over the years. It's growing on degrees of magnification every year. And I think that's a really key indicator of the hold that it's taking in government. And I think it's an exciting time because we're going to see how this really AI to scale, as we mentioned at the top of our discussion, how that starts becoming integrated into agency operations and the benefits that government's going to get from that.
What are the roadblocks that you've seen agencies run into as they've tried to make these changes and build their infrastructures in a way that supports what they do?
Historically, what we've seen in the government is that cultural change is a huge part of that, and you have to manage that. You need an executive sponsor who can be a loud, vocal cheerleader for the technology, who can really drive home the value proposition to federal employees, because as federal employees, we don't like change a lot often. And AI is going to change how your agency operates. It's going to change your business processes. And as an employee, you need to understand why that is and why is this a good thing that this is happening to me. So I think the cultural evolution and embracing this transformational technology is hugely important.
Wally, what have you seen organizations do to demonstrate the benefit to the employee in that cultural aspect that Dave talked about, not just in the technology aspect?
It's a great question. I want to come back to something that Dave said around some of those barriers in the cultural elements that have to be considered. So there's a lot of empathy, especially with a lot of concerns around generative AI, that needs to be considered. But when I think about some of those challenges, I think about it in terms of the way we've traditionally thought about technology in terms of people, process, and technology. We remember that sort of axiom. And so there are challenges and opportunities along each one of those pillars. And so when I think about some of the challenges related to people, one of the challenges that we see across agencies, and I'd say organizations as a whole, is there's an uneven understanding of AI capabilities. There's uneven trust, which is another big problem. And that there's extremes in some organizations fully trusted, in some organizations there's low trust, and that means that there's uneven actual adoption within the agencies. So the people element, those are some of the challenges. In terms of the process, some of the challenges we see there are around, I think in many cases there's a reflexive tendency to bolt AI onto existing processes. We talked about legacy processes and applications earlier, and so how do you think about adapting this new technology and using it to reimagine those processes? And then finally, the biggest challenge I think that we're seeing is that we talked about people, process, and technology. In this case, the technology is changing faster than the people and processes, and that's where we're seeing the tension. In terms of success, what we're seeing, where we're seeing agencies be successful is using not just a tops-down approach, but also a bottoms-up approach, where agencies, where we democratize access to the tools, but we also democratize access to ideas. And so we enable some of the practitioners who have the domain knowledge and the expertise to actually build, ideate, and be involved in pilots. And so that's one of the factors to success.
So that people process technology equation that you just outlined is interesting to me, because I'd say for the first 18 or 19 years that I did this, people would always say, especially technologists, the technology's good.
Right.
We're cool with that. It's the people and process that are more challenging. When the technology's changing as quickly now as it does, it strikes me that's not the case anymore.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. And so we look at just over the past 3 years, the pace of change in AI, generative AI, the innovation that's happening is difficult to keep up with. And so that is as one of the fundamental challenges. And I think there's an opportunity, we know there's an opportunity for agencies to learn from each other. We see that's another place where we see success, where agencies who have, in many cases, similar use cases. They may be different along the margins, but there are a lot of commonalities. And so where agencies can share best practices and use cases, that's another thing that we see is as far as accelerating success.
How do you as an auditor measure things like culture, measure things like comfort level and trust and things like that that might seem to be more abstract. Is there a way to do it, or is that really an art rather than a science?
It's an art rather than a science, but there are things you can look at. For instance, is your workforce trained, that I think are indicative and get at those issues and help to figure out whether people are really embracing this. And workforce across the federal government is a hard thing right now, especially with trained technology workforce. I do GAO's work in cyber and IT and starting to do AI workforce. And I think that we see ensuring that you have a trained workforce who have the skills, who can help evangelize this technology across the organization can really help an agency as it moves down the path of its AI journey.
I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, gentlemen, that the CIOs see benefits in people being able eventually to use AI wherever they can access the cloud. I'm thinking particularly about edge computing in the Pentagon. I'm thinking about applications for law enforcement operators, inspectors who are out in the field doing any of that. What have you looked at so far in those areas, Dave, and what are the potential risks and the potential benefits and success stories that you've seen in that type of work?
So we haven't done a lot of pure AI audits yet, mostly because there hasn't been a whole lot for us to actually look at. And I think that congressional interest is just now skewing around to have us look at that. But I do think just from the purely cloud computing side that cybersecurity is a huge part of that. You know, with the increase in cloud usage by agencies, the threat vectors are increasing that much, the attack surface is increasing. And so we would encourage all agencies to make sure that your cloud providers are providing the security that they're supposed to, that are in your contract, and that you're, as an agency, are staying on top of your own internal responsibilities, because cloud doesn't mean you hand off everything to someone else. You still have things you have to do. And again, those might be different from what you're doing before. So making sure that you've got that change management in the organization so that your security folks really can take a look at ensuring that they're doing what they need to do to make sure that data is safe, while also making sure that your vendor is fulfilling their part of the bargain as well.
Wole, what do you see as far as organizations thinking about computing at the edge, whether it's no matter what kind of environment it's in? What will that change as far as risk management goes? What will that change as far as security goes, and so on over time?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think David talked a lot about that. So, I mean, there's computing at the edge presents lots of opportunity. We're bringing decision support and analysis closer to where the problems lie. But yeah, I mean, the problems that we have to think about, or the risk we need to think about, is really around cybersecurity, management of those systems. And so those aren't necessarily new challenges, but those are some of the things that agencies are really doubling down on how they're thinking about it in the age of AI.
I know that you don't have crystal balls, gentlemen. We have a couple of minutes left, but I'm going to ask you to pretend that you do. I'll start with you, Wole. What should agencies be thinking about today that might not be on their radar screens for another year, 18 months, 2 years, or is that not even realistic to try to think about, given how quickly this stuff is changing?
Yeah, great question. No crystal ball, but I mean, we could see some things happening already. So one of the things I think agencies, if they aren't thinking about, they should start to think about, is agentic AI use cases. And so right now we're in the age where we're primarily using AI capabilities as a human plus an AI assistant. Right around the corner are opportunities around human plus AI agent teams. And then beyond that, autonomous agent scenarios. And so I think agencies want to get fluent with that progression and the underlying technologies that will make that possible.
Dave, Wole, it's great to have both of you on the program. Thanks for joining me today. And thank you for joining me for Mission Innovation, Becoming a Frontier Agency, presented by Microsoft. If you missed any part of the show, you can watch it in its entirety on our website, fedgovtoday.com, or the FedGov Today YouTube channel. I'm Francis Rose. Thanks for watching. Good night.